Chapter 18. Miss Hardy and her sons lowered their eyes. They were sure that Aunt Gertrude was about to announce that the kindly jeweler had died because of Myra's beating. "Is Mr. Bickford, is he?" Frank asked.
"He wants to see you at the hospital,"
his aunt replied. "Then he's alive!" Joe exclaimed.
"Of course he's alive," Aunt Gertrude said. "Very weak, naturally, so I don't think you boys should stay long, though."
"When should we go?" Frank asked.
"Mr. Bickford's got permission for you to come any time. He has something urgent to tell you."
Curious as to why they were being summoned, Frank and Joe left immediately to see the elderly man. Mr. Bickford was partially propped up in bed. He looked ill, but he gave his visitors a warm smile.
"I'm so glad you came," he said, in a voice barely above a whisper. "The doctor said a 10-minute visit, so I best be right down to business. Sit down, please. I feel it's my duty to warn you, boys."
"Warn us? About what?" Frank asked.
"That clerk who slugged me and his pals, they're determined to get you," Mr. Bickford answered. "Stokely thought he was in the shop alone, but I came in the back door quietly. He was talking on the phone and seemed to be giving orders."
Mr. Bickford stopped speaking and closed his eyes. He began to gasp a little. Frank jumped up and pressed a cup of ice water to the man's lips. Mr. Bickford sipped it gratefully. "Well, perhaps we should go," Frank suggested.
No, not yet. This won't take long," Mr. Bickford insisted, opening his eyes again. "I must tell you, Stokely was saying, don't tell me you couldn't help your boneheaded mistakes. Just don't make any more. I want the Hardys on the whaler." Just then Stokely, he caught sight of me and hung up the phone, and he turned livid, and before I could defend myself, he punched me and kicked and hit me with a stool and acted like a crazy man. Then I blacked out, and I woke here."
He closed his eyes and shuddered a little. Frank and Joe stood up, sensing that Mr. Bickford was exhausted and had told all he had known. "Thanks a lot," Joe said. "Joe and I are certainly sorry that we were the cause of this attack upon you."
"And we'll profit from your warning, you can bet it," Joe added. "Now you just take care of yourself."
When Frank and Joe reached home, they at once told their mother and aunt about Mr. Bickford's report. "And so you see, Aunt Gertrude," said Joe, "that man Chris wasn't calling you an old whaler. He was talking about trying to get us boys on their motor whaler boat."
Said Aunt Gertrude. "Well, just the same, he has quite bad manners. Doesn't know how to treat a lady."
Miss Hardy was extremely concerned and said so.
"I believe if Joe hadn't been rescued from that cave, those dreadful men would have put him aboard the whaler and taken him far away. Frank would have been next." "Exactly," said Aunt Gertrude. "And I'm sure your father never intended for you boys to become so deeply involved in this horrible case. I believe my brother would thank you, Laura, to forbid these boys from any further detective work against such men as Taffy Marr."
Frank and Joe were fearful their mother might take Aunt Gertrude's advice. After several moments of silence, Miss Hardy answered.
"Fenton expects his sons to follow through and see justice done. He doesn't want me to pamper them into being cowards. However, I expect them to be cautious and alert. Frank and Joe don't deliberately run into trouble."
The boys were relieved. Each kissed their mother and thanked her for her confidence, and now that the tension was over, Joe grinned and said, "Mother, we should have been born with extra eyes in the back of our heads so that we could see in all the directions."
"Well, you could wear those special spectacles that reflect what's in back of you," Aunt Gertrude suggested.
"Well, they wouldn't work at night, though," Joe replied. "And then, when most of the sluggings, that seems to be when they take place." The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Frank answered and was handed a special delivery letter. "It's for you, Mum, from Dad," he called. Miss Hardy opened the envelope quickly, and presently she said,
Good, your father's coming home. That will certainly solve a lot of problems.
Then she read further.
But not right away. He and Mr. Wright have to testify against 2 men suspected of stealing the antique plane.
Dad found it? Joe burst out.
Yes, listen to this. I have good reason to believe the hijackers are part of the gang I've warned the boys about. I'm sure these men have pals who are watching me, tapping my phone, and intercepting radio messages, so I decided to use the mail. In emergency, you can contact me in care of Elmer Hunt, president of the Oceanic Electronic Company, San Francisco.
The rest of the note was for her personally. Frank and Joe went upstairs and discussed their next move. Both agreed that they should do everything possible to learn where the whaler was moored. I guess it wouldn't be too smart to use our sleuth to hunt down the whaler, Frank remarked. We'd be spotted at once, and anyway, we can't fix the horn yet. I don't think it'd be good to take Tony's boat either, Joe said. He was referring to their school friend, Tony Parto. Well, how about we arrange with someone who has a cabin cruiser to help us make a search? Frank suggested. Joe's eyes twinkled. That's pretty expensive. How about the tug that nearly rammed me in the fog? What was the name on it? I'm not sure, Joe. I was pretty busy getting out of the way, but it seemed to me I saw the word Annie on the side. The boys decided to go to the docks on their motorcycles. These were easier to maneuver and hide than their rented car. Soon after they left, Frank and Joe noticed that a car with 3 men was following them. None of the passengers looked familiar. We better do something fast and shake off those men, Frank advised. Guess we'll have to play hare and hounds, Joe observed. What do you suggest? Well, let's head for Biff Hopper's and pretend to be staying there, Frank answered. We can sneak out their rear door before those men have a chance to go around to the garden. Joe nodded. And take a back street to the docks. That'll score 1 for us. They explained their plan to Miss Hopper, who let them out of the kitchen door, and Frank and Joe hurriedly crossed the rear lawn, which was out of sight of the street. They jumped the hedge, and 20 minutes later the Hardys were in the Harbour Master Corrigan's office, inquiring about a tugboat named Annie. The man flipped open a ledger and ran down a list. I guess you mean the Annie K. She comes in here once in a while. Is she docked here now? Joe asked. I'll see. Corrigan consulted a chart on the wall. Yes, she is. Waiting for some kind of shipment that's been delayed. Frank and Joe glanced at each other. There might be a chance of chartering the tug. Does the captain own the Annie K? Frank inquired. Yeah, and a real nice man he is too. Name's Captain Volper. The Hardys got direction on where to find the tugboat thanks to Corrigan, and then left. Captain Vorper was seated cross-legged on the deck of the Annie K, reading the morning paper. He had a ruddy complexion, slightly plump, and a good-natured man overall. Howdy, boys, he greeted the brothers. And what can I do for you? Frank made his request. So, you want to take a cruise around the bay up and down the coast, huh? Well, I guess I could do that. You fellers got any money with you? Sure thing, Frank replied. Can we cast off now? Well, as soon as I get my crew out of the coffee shop across the street. He ambled off down the gangplank and was nearly gone for 15 minutes when the boys walked up and down impatiently. Then Volper returned with 2 sailors whom he introduced as Hank and Marcy. A few minutes later, the old tug pulled away from the dock. The boys decided to stay in the cabin so as not to be seen by anyone going past the other boats. Captain Volper, did you ever notice a motor whaler around here? Frank asked. Yes, about a couple weeks back. Then I got caught in the fog and plumb near run someone down. Frank and Joe glanced at each other. Does the whaler have a name on it? Joe asked. The captain tilted back his cap and scratched his head. Well, seems to me it did. There's harbor regulations, you know. Let me see now. Unable to recall the name, he summoned Hank and Marcy and asked them. Sure, I remember, Marcy replied. Man alive, I wish I could own one of them plastic boats. They got speed. The name on that one I'd seen anchored up near the caves was Water Devil. I bet it is too, commented Joe, but did not explain the double meaning of his remark. The tug went directly to the spot, and the boys gazed at the sleek whaler which was anchored in shallow water. No one seemed to be around. "Ship ahoy!" Volper shouted. There was no answer. "I'm going aboard," Frank announced. When the captain reminded them that the law dealt harshly with snoopers, the young detective said, "Do you know that smugglers are operating in this territory?" Volper and his crew were amazed. "And you think that this is their boat?" the captain asked. "We suspect so," Frank replied. "We'd like to go aboard and hunt for clues." The captain sighed. "Oh, boys today are too smart for me. You go on ahead." He pulled up close to the whaler, and the boys jumped down onto the deck of the Water Devil. At first they made a casual surveillance. Seeing nothing suspicious, the boys began opening lockers. "This is the gang's boat, all right," Joe sang out, holding up a piece of paper with red and blue striping on it. A few figures had been scrawled upon it. "Say, Frank, do you suppose there's any diamonds or electronic equipment hidden aboard?" "Well, let's look." Nothing came to light until they opened a dashboard compartment, and a sack lay inside. Both boys reached for it at once, and the next second they were hurled violently across the deck, and they blacked out and toppled into the water. End of chapter 18.